Welcome to episode 332 of the Game Deflators Podcast. My name's John, and this week I am joined by Darren Hupke of Pixels and Polygons podcast and everything video games, right?
My
So-
umbrella title that I've done for all the junk that I try and put out and produce and do. Yes.
Well, Darren, thanks for coming on this week. Definitely appreciate you hopping in.
Yeah. Well, good to be back. Neighbors, I'm the closest guest to you in physical location, probably. But yeah, it's fun chatting about games and being on the show again.
Dude passes by my neighborhood and he's like, oh, thinking of John.
Thinking of John, seeing if he's out doing any garage sales, like shopping. Give me a heads up, because
Dude,
I get the random text from you every now and then on like oh, found was out this morning, didn't find anything, FYI, and like I'm like, oh yeah, I do like the good heads up on that. And I'm always curious, like every time I see a neighborhood yard sale and any of our the developments out here, I really want to go out and find my inner John Luck and get some stuff, But I've never scored video games on any like hunt like that.
I have occasionally scored on game hunts like that. I want to say the last time that I did some yard sailing was actually in your neighborhood, and this lady had this big arcade cabinet set up. And so I asked her, I'm like, hey, how much are you wanting for it? And I think I told you this, but she's like, oh, 7. And I'm like, oh, 700. She's like, no, 7,000. I'm like, what? Like, that's gonna sit here forever. And it was a cool ass cabinet. It was it wasn't Time Crisis, like some obscure gun con style game. And yeah, it was I don't remember the name of it, but it was in multiple pieces. She's like, oh, it works, no problem. I'm like, okay, well, like you have particle board coming out from the side here, like it's clearly not in the best of condition, and you want $7,000 for it, like it's not even tested, there's wires out, like really, like good luck. It's gonna
Too
sit
high.
there for a while. Yeah. So of course I asked if she had any other video games. Oh no, we sold them a long time ago. Like, yeah. All right, well, hey dude, of course here on the Game Deflators we like to talk about games we recently picked up, games we're currently playing, and we'll be talking about some underrated titles for the PlayStation this week. So in addition to our recent pickups, we're going to cover those top 3 titles for us. Really just quick underrated things, any generation, no holds barred on that one. And then we're going to also discuss remasters and if they're a necessary evil in the video game industry. Definitely some interesting comments that came up from a Sony exec recently. So we'll dig into that. But first, you can find the Game Deflators on our social media pages at Game Deflators on X, at the Game Deflators on Instagram, Facebook, Threads, and Blue Sky. We're also on YouTube, so go ahead and hit the little bell when we're on. You'll know. You can watch video game playthroughs and, of course, recordings of the podcast. And then we're also on your favorite podcast application, so check us out there. And lastly, we're on thegamedeflators.com. Darren, you want to go ahead and give a little plug for yourself here as well?
Yeah, I made my list easy and short. I quit all the other programs in my liberal political stance that I did, so we don't have to unpack that necessarily. But that just means it's easy to find me. I'm just on Blue Sky at darrenhupke.bsky.social, and then you can also find the Pixels and Polygons account at pixelsandpolygons.net. And then that's my website where I host my shop to buy everything physical that I have, like all my 32-bit library books and the retro game zines and other junk is on there. And then digitally, you can buy that through my Patreon page, patreon.com/Darren Hupke. You can go on there. There's a shop link, and you can get the digital copies of all the 32-bit library books and the retro game zines. And a bunch of free writing. That's I don't have any of the original writing stuff I do. It's not super consistent, but when I get like an original idea or thought, and it's not necessarily a book project or something I'm working on, I throw it up there on Patreon, and that's free to follow along with in addition to that shop. So
Nice.
yeah, that's where you can find my stuff and my names.
Well, I'll mix it up here a little bit. Let's actually dive into what you're doing right now, any current projects, things that you want to update folks on.
Yeah, at the time of this recording, I just launched the Kickstarter for the next batch of retro game zine issues. So I've been learning to balance that production schedule out. It is a monthly zine. It doesn't have to be monthly, but that is the commitment I made. And since it's just me doing it, like I've done it that way. So I literally was just mailing out Kickstarter copies of issues 3 and 4 up to last week, and I still have some to send out, but it's because we're waiting on one extra bonus item for that. But in order for me to keep this monthly cycle, I had to get another Kickstarter going for the next batch of issues. But I'm doing 3 issues in this Kickstarter. And the 3 issues will be issue 5, 6, and 7. Retro Gamezine covers a single game. It's like a micro magazine. It's like I can hold a copy I blurred out my background, so it's like you can't actually see what it is. So if you want to see the real thing, you'll have to go to my website.
That's a good plug.
But yeah, they're cool little microscenes. The goal of it is just to cover a single game in the issue. So a little bit of analysis, a little bit of game history, like a retro review, and then like a personal story or article about it. So just get some game detail, game info, and everything. And there isn't any rhyme or reason to it. My first issue was on It Came from the Desert, an MS-DOS game from 1989. The second issue was Chakan, the Forever Man from the Genesis. The third issue was Final Fantasy XI on PS2, 360 PC. And then the fourth issue is this game called Project Firestart, which was a Commodore 64 game. So there's literally no rhyme, reason, age, or anything for it. They're just, games. I think maybe the more, not necessarily like AAA, oh my gosh, like, we already know about this. I think the undeserved or unloved type of games is like kind of what I lean towards, kind of focusing on and everything. So that's what I've been doing. Starting with issue 3, I did have some guest contributors, and actually one of the editors from the old Electronic Gaming Monthly and OneUp.com, James, well, his nickname was like the Milkman, but he was a longtime editor and even editor-in-chief for some of their properties at the Ziff Davis stuff. He wrote an article for a while when Final Fantasy XI was new called My Life in Vanity L, and that was like how I played Final Fantasy XI before I personally owned a copy myself. But I used to love those articles, loved reading those magazines as a kid. I reached out to him just as a completely unknown person to him, just saying, hey, I'm doing this zine on Final Fantasy XI. I'd love to arrange something if you wanted to contribute an article to it. And he wrote this really rad article for me in it. And so now that's built some confidence and some steam and some raised the bar for me. So I'm getting contributors now in all these issues coming up. But in the new issues that are going on right now, being funded right now that you can order, starting with that issue 5, Aidan Moyer, who wrote Fight Magic Item, the history of RPGs book, amazing book, highly recommended to read that if you're a fan of RPGs. He's contributed an article to that issue, and it's covering Breath of Fire 4. And then I've got some other contributors towards the other issues, and they're talking about Blue Stinger on the Dreamcast is nice. Issue 6, and then issue 7 is Final Fantasy Mystic Quest is what it covers. So
those are all great titles too.
Yeah, again, just random. You can throw spaghetti at the wall, and you'll probably land on a title, and it's like, all right, cool, let's do that.
Yeah, speaking of Blue Stinger and underrated, I mean that's a quality game for sure. We did that on the podcast probably 2 or 3 years ago.
Yeah, it's fun diving into it. I always knew about the Japanese version having a different camera angle system. It was fixed cameras. Well, I guess they still kind of moved in a cinematic way, but it was like an evolved version of a static or fixed camera system. And then the US version, just complete third person, over the shoulder type of thing, what you'd expect from a system. So it does kind of change the feel and tone of the game a bit sometimes with some of those camera angles. So digging into the development history and read about some of those things, it just, giving me more information and learning more about a game I already love. It's a definitely an average game. It's got a lot of warts to it, but if you just are a fan of that era, you were in that moment, and you can look back and see what the intention of the game was, and you can see what through those flaws, like the diamond in that rough there. There's some fun stuff. I mean, it was a game that really pushed what the Dreamcast could do early on, and coming from being just a PlayStation or Nintendo 64 gamer, that was a big deal. That was a cool visual treat and everything. So
I mean, it still holds up today. A lot of those Dreamcast games hold up today very nicely, so it's always a plus whenever you can plug that in and get to playing. Yeah.
So it's just Retro Gamezine. That's the thing. 32-bit library. I'm technically working on Volume 5, which is going to be the gimmick for that one. Instead of being a set publisher, this one's going to be a greatest hits version. So the gimmick is it's going to be 50 games that were re-released under that greatest hits branding. So this is a chance to sample a bunch of games from a bunch of different publishers, but the goal is to have 50 games inside covered, with the traditional write-ups for every single game, screenshots and everything. So not just the heavy hitters, but fun games. I've already whittled the list down to the 50 games I'm going to do as well. So that'll mix things up a little bit for that. That I don't have a hard release date in mind just yet. It is something I'm just going to work on through the year. I mean, in my mind, I would like to have it out by the fall. But with Retro Game Zine kind of cooking and doing its thing, and technically there was another book that through a legal conversation is currently put on the back burner. That was something that was taking up a lot of time that now I've got to figure out what to do with that.
So you were gonna release a Kickstarter and stuff, but legal stuff kind of kicked in and be like, oh, we got to hold.
Yeah, so I had a Kickstarter for it, and it was 2 days from ending, and it was my most successful Kickstarter I have done to date. And 2 days before it ended, I received an email from a company just expressing some concern over the intellectual property rights, and wasn't exactly sure what my next steps could be or should be, but I knew I'm in not a position to go just pay the retainer fee for a lawyer and defend myself against a large video game publisher. So I took it down and made sure that no money was collected and everything, because I canceled it before it ended and everything. And then I did manage to actually find an IP lawyer just to figure out what the conflict potentially was with it, because through fair use laws and through coverage through education and informing and retrospectives, those should not cross those lines if it's transformative. So trying to figure out what I can do with the work that I was put into this book. It was digging into the franchise history of the Final Fight series. So there isn't a current or ongoing case or anything necessarily. It's just
you just got a cease and desist basically.
Yeah. I'm just a dude who isn't necessarily, even if it's on appropriate grounds or not, I'm just not in a position to have a legal battle with anybody over anything, and nor do I want to cause any kerfuffle or anything. I love Capcom games and everything. I'm just trying to be a fan of the games and
they Nintendo'd you.
So we'll see how I can pivot that into either finding what those appropriate issues were so that those can be resolved, and
I'm curious if there's any points of contact over at that specific publisher that you can reach out to and have that discussion and get that approval, versus, because I would think more than likely it was a random lawyer who got wind of it and said, oh, here's a letter, not really taking into consideration some of those other aspects. So I do kind of question if you could reach out to them and say, hey, here's everything laid out, not interested in a court battle, already took it down, etc. But here's kind of what I'm looking to accomplish. And I don't know, maybe that kind of pans out to something.
Yeah, I did send them an email and I did ask those questions.
Oh, and they were just
not
nope.
receive a response. It was
interesting.
And then I shared that with the legal people I did speak with as well too. I absolutely would be okay with understanding what terms would be for licensing, if there is an appropriate avenue or channel that this could be done at and everything. And there just wasn't contact. So bunch of weird stuff.
We're gonna start hashtag free the book.
But I think that might be the one way I can get away with doing it, is just giving it away for free. I'm not gonna try and profit this at all, but I put 8 months of time into it and I really like how it came out. There were some great contributors to it. It's a cool deep dive into just the history of the entire Final Fight franchise. I only made it because I'm a fan. Obviously I would love to make some money on that and all stuff, but if my other books and things can help me do that, I'm first and foremost not doing this to be rich. I'm doing this first and foremost because I enjoy doing this and I'm a fan of games and everything. So I'd rather it not collect dust. So we'll figure it out. It's all a long-term plan that I'm I'll have to settle down with.
Yeah, you probably could, like you said, give it away for free and just cover the cost of manufacturing and stuff.
Yeah. So. Well, even at least the digital version at the bare minimum, hey, at least there's a PDF of it, and then we'll figure out, what we can do in the future of
That's pretty
physical.
Cool. Yeah. So is 32-bit library volume 5, because it's greatest hits, are you gonna make it green? It's gonna be a nice.
I'm gonna make it ugly and that obnoxious green spine and that text and all that stuff. Yeah, I've already been messing around with some of that in Photoshop. But again, I should maybe ensure that it's not some type of IP or copyright conflict and all that stuff. But maybe the color scheme, at the very least, it'll be a green cover with that obnoxious red or brown, maybe font choice color. Just to kind of help give that visual appeal of course. Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Maybe really cool cover art, but just the spine is what's the ugly green and everything. So.
I've got, I think, volumes 1 through 3 somewhere behind me here on the shelf. So it's alphabetized. You're under the Hupke section. It's in there. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I still want you to have your setup in your like the game library
Dude,
behind you.
I
I know, but I
I
know you have your system is your computer
yeah.
and everything set up there. It makes total sense.
I
But
did
you have a
this.
massive library.
I know. I did this last time on the last episode. So I could theoretically do this, but the problem is then I got like it blurs everywhere.
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, so
But
that's why I
those are
don't do it.
all the games he has, and that's just one side of the wall. There's more that it wraps around. Like, how do you sit
Yeah.
on that and not have that be your set
Dude,
design? You know?
I know it's painful, and I got this table with like magic cards and other crap behind me. Um, I know. I was talking about it last week with Will on PlayStation 8 Dead. I had a green screen that I had purchased to put behind me so I could use that background, and it just wasn't clicking. It wasn't
Mm,
working for StreamYard. So
mm. Yeah, not fun.
yeah.
Oh well.
So well, let's get into talking of video games. Recent pickups. I don't have any in hand this week because they are actually in process of coming in. Let me check. I think did I buy off Amazon? I know I got one on eBay. So I got Sinking City coming in, the first one.
Mm.
I've been seeing all their advertisements for Sinking City 2. It's like, well, I might as well buy the first one. I had my eye on it for quite some time and just never picked it up. So that is the only game I have coming in right now. And then Magic the Gathering, I've been on occasion. I think I told you just a while back. Every time my credit card reward money hits to a certain point, I buy a big card. So usually in the $300-$400 range if I can, like a reserve list card that's not going to be reprinted again. So I have a transmute artifact that's coming in as part of a much larger deck that I'm building for Commander to try and destroy everybody that I play against. So that's kind of what I got going on right now in terms of pickups. Not a bunch of crazy stuff, but I don't know. Maybe here in the near future, I'll get some games that catch my attention.
Are you going to be trying to collect the all the Final Fantasy cards in that set when it comes out?
Man, I'm tempted.
Yeah,
I'm thinking of it.
I mean, I've been off and on. Like, I come back on to like Arena and everything these days. Um, but like when that Final Fantasy set comes back, I'm gonna for sure play it then. But like I'm tempted to like buy some physical cards, at least just to have some, like something on hand to play with those. And when that set comes out specifically, because
Yeah.
combining two things I love for sure.
Well, I mean, if you have people that want to play casually, it would be like Commander and stuff. You can pick up the Commander decks for that,
Hmm.
and they're just pre-con decks. I think one has Sephiroth, one has Cloud, I believe, and there might be a couple other characters Final Fantasy related that have their own decks. And then the booster box, I don't know. I've kind of had my eye on it, but I don't know yet. I kind of swore that I wouldn't support their whole like universes beyond approach because I really want it to be just Magic the Gathering lore. And they've been going like Spider-Man and SpongeBob and all
Yeah,
this other stuff,
yeah,
right? So I'm like, man, that's so off kilter from like what Magic is supposed to be. But then there's Final Fantasy. I'm like, I love Final Fantasy.
yeah.
So is that something I don't want to dive into? Maybe. But I just haven't really beyond that, I haven't really thought too much of it.
Interesting. Yeah, I don't mind the. I mean, they were so like stuck on not stuck, but I mean, they had their formula. They had their their core set that would come out. The annual core set. Then they'd have like the another major set with 2 expansions to that, and then they kind of just do that on a calendar year and everything. So now they found a new calendar update that lets them put out more sets and more cards technically. So the Universe Beyond stuff, maybe that's bringing those casual fans to come back and dip in, dip out, whatever they want, and then still the folks who want that core Magic experience and like that world and that lore that's being
Yeah.
built obviously for decades still get that. But then I guess the weird line being blurred is that technically you can still use some of those cards as standard, and then now
Yeah.
you're like, okay, wait,
Yeah.
what deck? What is your deck made out of? Is there like some real synergy going on there? Because I see like you've got Aether Drift like cars, you've got Final Fantasy
Yeah.
characters, and you got some classic goblins running around here. So this is kind of weird.
I'm gonna have Mr. Krabs mount a Aether Drift vehicle, and I will add 5 Krabby Patty tokens to him. Like that's or
Yeah,
counters. Yeah,
it does make it a little weird.
Yeah, it's definitely weird, and they started that with the Walking Dead stuff, I believe, right? Like I want to say it was one of the first Universes Beyond sets in Jurassic Park, and that was kind of like okay, cool. Like from a collector standpoint, it's kind of cool to have those cards, okay, used in Commander. But when I saw the announcement of oh well, these are going to be good for Standard, I was like, oh man, that's a little off-putting to me because I really do like that Magic lore component, and that's what got me into Magic was the lore aspects. And so as they've continued to bring in all these other like outside things, I've lost a little interest in it because there's just so much going on, and there's so many sets coming out as well that you can't keep up with the stuff that's
Hmm.
coming, into
Yeah.
market. So that's kind of a downside there, which is why I've kind of been shifting to Commander, even though it's the last thing I wanted to do. So I've been I have a lot of cards already that I can build Commander decks with, so I'm kind of set in that respect. But I wanted to build like a competitive based Commander deck,
Mm.
and to do that is pretty expensive. So I've been essentially building one of the higher price decks for the last year, and just kind of pull in big cards here and there to start doing that, so I can get in that level of play. And in Standard, I kind of want to get back into it, but I don't know. It's just so much. I really wish I would have done like less sets over time and really focused on the story components of it and then produced more content around that. Like
Hmm.
even if it was like you said, right, a core set and then have a couple subsets, like I don't know, do like Phyrexia and then like they used to do, right? Like you had the Larwin block, you had your
Hmm.
blocks. It's like, okay, we're gonna focus on this particular like Laro and Shadowmoor, Eventide, all that's coming out in this block, and then we'll do the next block and the next block and have it fully focused on like that area. That to me is like the peak of Magic, and that's gone away. So,
Hmm.
oh,
Yeah. I
we'll
mean,
just
I guess there is still some of that there, but you don't have like the evolving, growing story of that block with its
yep,
release cycle. It's like, hey, here's the set. There is lore, there is a story within this, but like you're not seeing that story told over time
yeah,
as new stuff comes out, which is
yeah. We
like,
we
yeah.
had Murders at Karnov Manor or whatever, and then it shifted over to Cowboys, and then
Mhm.
like Duskmorn right after that. Like that to me is just not a cohesive storyline that's being told there. It's just, hey, here's like Innistrad Midnight Hunt or whatever. Those two kind of tied in because they had all the vampires and stuff
Mhm.
a couple years ago. But beyond that, yeah, it's kind of loose. And I'm not really feeling it. So yeah, it
Yeah,
is what it
back
is.
in back in my day when I was a youth playing Magic, um, during the Tempest and Weatherlight kind of
Mm-hmm.
sets were coming out. We played this weekly arena. My brother and I played this weekly arena, is what they called it. So this is before all the games and everything. But on Saturdays we go to our local card shop and you play like ranked games. You use your DCI number and everything, and
Yep.
that was what they did back in then. But for that they had it was called Vanguard, and there was like you at the start of that arena season you picked one of two set of like 6 cards, I believe, that were these Vanguard cards. They were like medium sized. They were bigger than regular Magic cards, but they had like a global effect that would impact
Yeah.
your side of the board. And that was like I remember the first time I thought like, oh man, they're breaking Magic. They're like doing something new and everything. And then fast forward 2 decades and you realize like, oh no, that was so simple. Like if only things were
Yeah.
as simple as that was. Like that was even still in world and in lore for what was going on with all the Weatherlight crew. They were all the heroes of that storyline and everything. So
Yeah. We just played a
um,
big 5-player game last week with a few friends, and we were playing Plane Chase specifically,
mm.
and that was a lot of fun. Just like
Yeah, those plane chase cards did when
yeah,
those came back. I thought the same thing. I was like, "Oh my gosh, this is like Vanguard. They have like those
hmm
global effects. Like these are cool."
yeah, it was a lot of
Um,
fun
but
doing that one.
um, we're talking pickups, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry, your Magic conversation
No,
got
yeah,
me
yeah, no,
Magic.
it's all good. Beyond pickups though, what I'm currently playing, I'm still playing Fantasian Neo Dimension on
Mm,
PS5. So progressing through that kind of nicely. I mention it all the time. My biggest issue with some of these games is I play them at night and I start falling asleep.
mhm.
So there's times where I'm like really rolling, feeling good about the game, and then I just start to doze off, and like I just have the character standing there. And I'm streaming these too on YouTube. So of course, like if somebody's watching, I'm like, why the hell isn't he moving for like the last 30 seconds? Because I dozed off in the middle of it. Or I'll continue walking into a wall and it's like, yeah, John's falling asleep. And at that point, I'm generally like, okay, I got to get to a save point ASAP so I can go to sleep. It could be 20 minutes into a stream. It could be an hour and a half into a stream. But at some point during that stream, I generally fall asleep at some point. It's ridiculous. But that's what I'm currently playing. And my wife and I were hoping to get back into Mario RPG. We were playing that for some time, and we've just been so busy with just general life and um, you know, schedules and such. And then we've been picking up new shows to watch. So like we're watching Silo right now on Apple
Oh,
TV.
so good.
Oh, dude, it's so crazy. Like, it doesn't have the best like Rotten Tomato score for like the casual like viewer,
Mm.
but dude, it's so solid.
Well,
Like
I didn't
it.
even read any of that stuff. Brian Rigsby actually was saying something about it online. A few people had told me about it, but I can't trust people I know, so I don't ever listen to recommendations for things. But then Brian online, he posted something about like, something about season 2, like loving it or whatever. And I was like, man, I've
Yeah.
heard good things about this. If Brian's into this, I'll give it a shot. And instantly hooked. Loved
Oh
every
yeah.
second of it.
It's
Like,
like a
oh
better Fallout, in my opinion. Like
yeah.
Fallout is cool, but like this is
I think the
very much.
ideas that I like about Fallout, like how the world would react to this new environment and everything, with these, underlying tones of like, yes, there was a history that came before this, but that's not necessarily the point as these characters navigate trying to learn within the boundaries they have. And like, it's a
Mhm.
crazy cool setup and crazy dramatic and crazy
Yeah.
rad. Yeah, love
Yeah,
it.
it's just so cool. And then I mean, I'm on like I don't know how far are you? Did you finish season 2?
I've got to finish season 2, yeah, a couple weeks ago. So I did
Okay.
catch up, quote unquote.
Yeah, I'm still on, I think season 2, episode 6, I wanna say,
Mm,
or 7. So we got a few episodes left in the season, but it's solid. And then, I hear Ascension, I think, is pretty good, so I gotta
mm.
look into that one. Severance is another one that's apparently pretty good.
Yeah, that one's rad.
We're
I'm watching that now. There's only one episode left of that, and
on
that's a
season 2,
fantastic show
right?
too. So
Yeah.
yeah, if you like Silo, where people are trapped underground trying to figure out what's going on in the world around them, Severance is about some people who are trapped underground trying to figure out what's going on in the world outside and around them and everything, but just through a completely different lens and everything.
Yeah, yeah,
Just to
sounds like it'd be
water it
good.
down the same ways. Yeah.
Yeah, and then I have, ebooks of the Silo series I gotta dig into,
Mm.
so I'll check those out at
Yeah,
some point.
that's super inspiring too. Reading what Silo was and how it came from. Like the dude self-published and completely just did the first story of it all on his own and everything. So for just, I mean, that's like, to me, I'm like, oh my gosh, okay, that's the dream. Like just do something on your own, DIY, be creative, just keep doing what you want to do. And for something like that to get picked up, and now it's an Apple TV Plus show, out in the ether, with giant actors and Steve Zahn. Like, I mean, like,
Mhm.
okay, cool, I made it.
Yeah, you got Common in there playing some
Yeah.
characters as well, like it. Yeah, it's good stuff. Um, what else was gonna talk about video games? I don't know. We got on this tangent on Silo, which is
Mhm.
still positive. It's still a great
Yeah.
thing.
I've got I've got some pickups. I guess the pickup my pickups and current really playing are the same thing too. Um, for me, well, I mean, I started the year with Dynasty Warriors Origins, which I thought was rad, but then that bled right into that stealth drop of Dynasty Warriors Abyss.
Mhm.
And that was like this poor man's Hades, and it was one of those like broke average games that was just good enough for Darren to like wrap his brain around. And I put like 30-ish hours into that, and I stopped playing Origins almost because like that game became more addicting to me. But since then, Monster Hunter Wilds just came out, about 2 weeks ago, a little less than that, and that's been addicting. That's been super fun. And playing that loop and everything, I finished like the main story and unlocked that your hunter rank to kind of like blow up from there. And the Suikoden 1 and 2 HD remakes or remasters.
Very nice.
Um, I just rolled credits on Suikoden 1 yesterday, and with a fully complete save file with all 108 characters and like the secret character coming back from the dead in that story. Plus, just reading about how there are characters who do get imported into Suikoden 2 with your save file. So I got all those characters like up to like level 52, so they get their max benefits and they're maxed out their
Nice.
weapons. Like I literally like squeezed every drop out of that. I've never actually seen the end of Suikoden 2. As a kid, I got I got stuck saved right before a boss fight that I couldn't ever beat, and I only had a single save. I didn't have multiple saves or anything going.
Um,
So loved it and everything, but I actually never saw the end of it happen. And so now like I'm really excited to like go in with this fresh file with all of the best things I could possibly bring over from Suikoden 1 to help me just do a full 100% playthrough of 2. But that'll be my current play update there.
Very nice. Yes, Suikoden 1 and 2 are 2 of my favorite RPGs on the PS1. And
Yeah.
I don't know if you saw, but on Suikoden 2, the remaster that was done, they actually at the end it says, "Oh, save file" or whatever, and to kind of prep you for what you would typically do for Suikoden 3, like bringing those characters in on the next game. So
Mm.
it that's kind of a hint, right? That we might be getting like a 3 and 4
Yeah,
remaster.
I wonder if because these are such true like ports essentially. They're like ports of the original game just kind of cleaned up. Like
Yeah,
they had to do some UI changes, and obviously they had to do the things to allow those save files to be imported in between each other. So like part of me thinks that I wonder if that's just accidentally done because of the
because it's
process,
already
but no way
yeah,
would they leave that in there then, because if they could do all the other changes to like the UI stuff and make that work,
they could take
they
that
could have
out too.
easily have opted that out. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, it was less impactful from 2 to 3 for like what content was imported, but there still was like some hidden items and some recipes and things you can get from your
Mhm.
headquarters in that game. I did remember doing that as a kid, but never got all the perks necessarily. But I loved
Yep.
Suikoden 3 as well.
Yeah, 2 has one of the most evil characters of all time in video games, which is
Yeah.
fantastic. So I always enjoyed
Luca,
that. Yep.
Luka
Disgusting
Doncic.
character. Yeah, and I needed to jump into 3. That's one of those that I've been considering playing, for, like, our new games resolution. This year, my new games resolution is Witcher 1 on the
Mm.
PC, so I'll dive into that at some point.
Interesting. Yeah, Suikoden 3 is again, I'm sure 2 is probably the best, and it's a reason why that's the fan
Yeah.
favorite. I love 1, but 3 is my favorite in
Mm.
the series in general. But I know that's probably going to be transplanted once I, complete 2 here in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, 2's fantastic. So, if you haven't played that, anybody out there listening, watching, definitely play that. Alright, dude. So we already talked playing, pickups, updates from you. Let's talk into some underrated titles. So just reached out to Darren the other day and was like, "Hey, I don't know, let's talk PlayStation, any generation, just 3 games, right?" And I'm looking for my list here. Uh, Speaking of RPGs, Arc the Lad is on my list.
Mm.
Did you ever play that one?
Mhm.
Yeah.
That was also in the 32-bit library volume 4 book. I cover that entire set because that's Atlas, Enix, Working Designs, and Square Games are all covered inside that volume.
Yeah. Yeah, that, number I haven't beat number 3, but number 1 and 2 of Arc the Lad were fantastic. Arc the Lad 1 specifically, very short and sweet RPG, to the point with these, like, spirits that you're supposed to gather or help support throughout the game, and then, of course, number 2 is very much, like, outside of what happened in number 1 for the most part, but then you have this crossover, which is pretty unique as well, in the game where Arc kinda ties in with Elk, in that series, but I always enjoyed those games. I mean, I jumped into that not having played or learned anything about it. My brother and I were at a Best Buy. We picked up the collection when we were younger. I said, "All right, we'll give it a shot," because we were in an RPG binge at the time, and jumped into that and had a hell of a time with all those games. He played number 3 and completed it. I just never did.
Hmm.
So it was good stuff. Um, Other title for me is Guitaru Man on the
Mhm.
PlayStation 2. I assume you've played that one as
Yeah.
well at some
Yep.
point. Kind of a difficult game for the most part, but
Mhm.
it's, for anybody that hasn't played, it's a rhythm-based game with a character, like a young kid that turns into Guitaru Man and is battling all of these different enemies, as this character, and it's just good, fast-paced rhythm game is what it comes down to, and it reminded me of my days of playing, like, Bust a Groove or Bust a Move, no, Bust a Move, I think is what it was back then, the dancing game. We used to play a lot of that. Um, Anything that had, button mashing with like triangle and square and circle, all these things coming into play, was just always a good time. And this game in particular, I definitely enjoyed playing that one. And then my last one here is Red Faction. Easily one of my all-time favorite first-person shooters. Like, anytime somebody says, "Hey, give me like a list of your top first person shooters," that one's always on there. The story behind Red Faction being stuck on Mars, and this like mining colony and all this evil stuff going on within the mining colony, the way that everybody revolts, rises up against the company, your escape to try and leave Mars and such. It's just, there was nothing else like it at the time, in my opinion. And
Yeah.
we always enjoyed playing that one.
Yeah,
And then
that
the
one's
multiplayer is fantastic.
yeah. Oh, yeah, yeah. Every game had to have at least try multiplayer out at least, a little bit then, but I remember, obviously, like, the heavy hitters in, like GoldenEye or Perfect Dark and all that stuff, like, leading into, like, that previous generation getting close to PS2, um, everything still was kind of like level based or section based and everything, and so even though there was like a general narrative, like it did feel like you stopped and continued like a story and everything. The Red Faction just had like this world that was like like similar to like what Half-Life did, like you like even in like the downbeat moments, it still felt like you got to play and experience and have like some like slower pace like moments while then you got in like ramped up and some craziness and everything. And then plus like the gimmick of like those destructible environments, like, hey, is that door locked? Well, cool, you can blow yourself around it, or you can shoot a hole in the wall and just like climb through. And that was always super rad.
Well, and like we talked Red Faction a few times on here, is that I really do like that game a lot, but you can have like the resistance symbol or whatever on the wall and you're like, okay, yeah, that's definitely an area that I can blow up, right? And so being able to find like hidden items and such very early on in the game just because of that alone is pretty cool too.
What do they call that? I think they called that geomod technology. Was like on the back of the box, like the selling point for the bullet points for that. You also mentioned Guitar Man. I love that cover artwork.
Yes,
I'm a big like comic book fan and everything, and that art style, like to me, like I would read like a cool indie comic with that exact same art style like today. Like I'd give money down, monthly issue, like give it to me, and like I always just loved it. Like the cover art was one of those games that like you definitely could see not coming to America, not being localized and everything. But not only did they bring it over, but they kept like the really rad like identity of what like the visual like energy of the game was in that cover art. Because we got Eco from Sony, but we also got that like North American box art with like just a weird like odd ugly render of like
the horns
like, the
and everything.
Yeah, and it's just like it wasn't like flashy, but then you see what like the artistic like design of what like the Japanese box art was, and it was like this really cool like painting with like the little windmill, and you can see the shadow of like the figure in Yorda like in the bottom, like that was like really rad, but it didn't like try and like pretend its identity was different for the game that it was. Guitar Man just got to show up and be like, this is exactly what I am. Look at the cover art. This is some crazy kinetic, like wild art and energy, because the story is just kind of a ridiculous, like rhythm adventure game that, you buy, you're going to get what you buy. And always
exactly. When you bring up Eco, and that was actually funny enough, as I was going through this list, I'm like, oh man, like Eco is definitely one of my tops in terms of underrated titles, because Shadow Colossus got all the love, right? Like, oh, remaster. I would love to have an Eco remaster. We'll talk about remasters in a bit here, but or remakes and such. That to me was like a fantastic PlayStation 2 title that really kind of showed the quality of that console, like what it could do early on. And I love the artwork. I love the environments, the story itself. It's subtle, but it's very solid of a story. And I really wish we would have got that Japanese artwork. Like, when I saw pictures of it early on, I think it was PlayStation Magazine number 50 or 51, I want to say, is when they previewed that title. And I was really looking forward to it. And I'd seen the original box art and such at that point in time. And when I got it Christmas morning, I'm like, what the hell is this? But yeah, still was a fantastic game. And then Guitar Man, just kind of jumping back on that real quick. Scott Pilgrim is what stands out to me with that, right? Like there's so many parallels, I think, in like that character in Guitar Man and just like that world and what it is. It's just something that reminds me of Scott Pilgrim as well, even though I think Guitar Man technically came out first, I want to say.
Yeah, but before the first volume of the original comic, for sure. I think it absolutely did. Yeah, that's an interesting like tie. I mean, it's weird because I also had that same like I see that art and I see that energy and like it makes me want to read like an indie comic, and like Scott Pilgrim is a fantastic original indie comic with some cool art style
and music related too, right?
Yeah, it's true. Cool. I threw out some. I'll do mine in chronological order as well. Incredible Crisis was a game I think technically was published by Titus in North America, but I don't remember the original Japanese publisher. It has like a really like stark yellow cover with like a red exploding head and everything. I'm saying this from pure memory, so if I'm wrong, dang, that sucks. But if I'm right, man, I'm obsessed with PlayStation stuff. But it was a really odd collection of like like I think my love of a game like WarioWare Inc. Comes like from playing this as a kid, because there was a collection of like kind of like a miniature like interactive like moments. It's almost like QTEs of like this family having just like the most frantic and like ridiculous day, but all of the events and things they get into would just involve like a simple like to learn like button pressing mini game or timing or rhythm type thing, but all just kind of reacting to like the wild events they were getting through. But it was all in like short, like super fast, like energetic bursts. It was just completely different. I think much like how Parappa the Rapper caught me by surprise as a young kid, like that. That caught me in like a really surprise moment, because like the gameplay is very light, but like really, like, what is the purpose of playing games? It's to be entertained, to have like an interactive medium. And like, yes, the interactivity isn't as deep as maybe other video games. I'm gonna still get the same amount of entertainment and like joy out of playing that game as I would like another maybe hardcore game and everything. So as a younger gamer, it just kind of opened my mind to realizing that like games can come in like all shapes and sizes, like what are those underlying mechanics, and what is that underlying like gameplay drive that's hooking you. Like if that's fun, who cares what that package is, but like obviously when it can be silly and like wrap it all together, like it's definitely worth it.
And Incredible Crisis is one that I beat probably about 4 or 5 years ago, and I randomly had in the collection. I just thought, okay, well, I'm looking for a really quick, short game to play. It's only like an hour and a half, I think, like in total. And you're right, it's just like all these little mini day sequences that take place, and it's just so goofy. And it's a fun game. It's kind of like a Mr. Mosquito in a way, right? Like it's just something casual to sit back, pass the time, but you're enjoying it as you're going through and just kind of appreciating the art of what it is.
I'm so proud of myself. I'm Googling this while you're saying that. The stark yellow cover with the red exploding head and the Titus logo right in that
I should have told
corner.
you were right. Yeah, because as you were saying, I'm like, yeah, that's correct.
I love it. I never owned it. Just it was like a borrowed kind of like rental experience for me. And then there's a demo, probably like an official US PlayStation Magazine demo or something like that. I would play that over and over again as well too. But like the main game, because it wasn't very long, it was one, if you didn't have to own it, but rented it or borrowed it, you definitely get some fun out of it. But
yeah,
love that game. Just from an underrated standpoint, definitely one that doesn't probably get a lot of attention. Next one, Pixel Junk Monsters Deluxe. Pixel Junk Monsters is just a really good like tower defense game. Pixel Junk Monsters Deluxe was like the PSP like port of that. It was a PS3 downloadable like network title originally, and I obsessed over it and played every ounce of it and everything, and just loved it. But when the PSP one came out, being able to take it on the go, it had every level from the original, but then it also had like this extra island off to the side with far more additional levels with new enemy types and everything that kind of made the strategy of it all kind of like change. I mean, I think it got overlooked in just an era of like, Plants vs. Zombies and like this early wave of like, those like PopCap and like I don't want to say indie games, because these were all like large budget like funding like backed like things, but like those like kind of a smaller scale like entertainment or mobile style like entertainment games. I think it got overlooked for that reason, because it was just on the PlayStation, whereas like when the App Store launched and you can play you can play Plants vs. Zombies, people were like stuck on that everywhere. Or Angry Birds, like people were just stuck on their phones and iPads and everything, just playing those games. And I think people miss this one. Tower defense doesn't necessarily get its flowers either, but you give me a good tower defense game, and like I will be on that for a long time.
There were some solid ones on the PlayStation 3, actually. I forgot. I was looking at Pixel Junk Monsters right now. I don't have this one.
Crystal Defenders was that Final Fantasy one I played to death. That had like that fun, almost Tactics Advance adjacent kind of like art style and everything to it.
Yeah, I'm trying to see which one it was that I would play. It was an online only type thing, or PlayStation Network only game on the PS3, and I cannot remember for the life of me what it was. But you created towers, and you had like spiders that were coming out to attack. Like it was more techie with like mechanical spiders. I don't remember the name of it, dude. And of course, my PlayStation 3, my original PS3 is gone, right? And I don't have my original PlayStation Network account from that day. So yeah, I don't remember it, dude. If I find it out, I'll text you. Oh, here it is. Savage Moon. I think that's
Oh
what it
yeah, I remember Savage Moon. Yeah. That description, I was like, oh man, I feel like I know these games. But
Yeah.
no, Savage Moon was another like rad one. Yeah.
Yeah, that was a cool one.
Yeah, that's a good one. And then I had another PS3 era game, Flow. I think similar reasons to like Incredible Crisis. I think it did blow my mind that not only did I'm sure a game like Incredible Crisis did not get to make much financially and everything, and trying to be like a retail release and share space on the shelf with other big games and all that stuff was probably very difficult to do and not easy for publishers to greenlight. But Flow was one of those early PlayStation Network titles that I think just kind of helped show that like you could spend a few bucks, not have to pay like a full retail price, full disc price, like giant AAA like expectation. You can have just a game released, big or small, and yeah, it was kind of like you could almost call it the PS3 Astrobot. It was a game that really showcased what the technology of like the controller and hardware and stuff like that could do. It was a lot of like the 6-axis, like tilting the controller around to kind of like move a little creature that kind of ate other creatures around it to grow bigger and then ultimately move deeper into this world. It just visually was a cool game, low key, meditative experience, not very long or in depth. There weren't like crazy mechanics to unlock or anything. Once you got through an entire cycle, you would unlock a different type of see an enemy or whatever these things were, and it would have kind of different abilities, and you'd be able to kind of go through the whole thing again, but with like this different unlocked type of character. But it was just a simple concept, having it be like a low key kind of game, but with a budget and a price that kind of matched it. At that point, now I knew like the scale of games like can change, and so really thankful of like the Xbox 360 and the Microsoft's like arcade, because then once like that started kind of rolling out, become the norm, and Sony's rolling out the PlayStation Network, like so many games like come from like hundreds of hours into a lot of these games, not just like having to go down to like GameStop or Best Buy and drop down a pre-order for the next AAA thing. Like my next favorite game could very well be just some weird like one-off digital download from some complete unknown studio and everything, but you just never knew. It was like the Wild West at that point.
Yeah, when you brought up Flow, I remember playing that for a lot of times during the PS3 era. There was another game that I was trying to bring up to you. I can't remember the title of that one either, but you kind of had like spike bombs and something. You had like your ship in the middle, and you were trying to actively shoot out like any other game like that. But it was just, I don't know, it had like that same visual type of appeal as Flow, very neon in the way that it was. The visuals, I'll have to look that one up too. I
Hmm.
can't remember it, dude, but it was again another like PlayStation Network only type title.
Hmm.
So I don't know, anybody listening or watching, if I don't know, somehow my obscure description rings a bell for you, I would definitely be interested to remember what that title was.
Yeah. That
Um,
reminds me to one more, Joe Danger. So Hello Games made it. You may know them from massively overhauling a simple like space simulator in No Man's Sky into some like ridiculously epic, super multi-layered, like genre-defying No Man's Sky, whatever its current update's called.
mhm.
But they made a couple of these Joe Danger games, which was like basically Excite Bike mixed with Tony Hawk, that were just really like, fun, simple to learn, difficult to master. Again, PS3 network era digital download, but the super fun, really rad game. Great presentation, great sound, great design, all that stuff. Love those games.
I'll give you one more before we hop on next topic.
Hmm.
Pain on the
Yeah,
PlayStation 3.
yeah.
Dude, so many hours into that
So
game.
fun. And
Such a
then you
great
could
game.
it was like, hey, you liked Burnout 3's crash mode? Well, skip the racing. Let's just do this ridiculous fun level-based score chase where you can trigger
Mhm.
some level altering like major crazy things and just jack up that score and find hidden areas and do
Yeah,
it all over again through the slingshot.
launch a character through a slingshot and just watch everything blow up around you and gather points. Like, it was
Yeah.
a ton of fun. So
Yeah, that early PlayStation Network era,
there
that's
was a
some
lot of
solid
good,
hits.
like, yeah, Fat Princess we talked about. There's a lot of
Mhm.
good stuff that came out during that period of time. Okay, so the other thing I brought up to you, I'm reading this directly from my phone. It's a PlayStation veteran, Shoei Yoshida, says the single player games have become so expensive to create that selling remasters is a necessary moneymaker. So it has another quote on here. So he's a former president of the company, and it says single player games now cost so much they needed additional income by doing remasters and porting to PC. It makes sense, right? When we hear about AAA games talking, costing hundreds of thousands of dollars to create, I don't know, maybe more. I think it's even higher than that, in the millions. When you have titles that are costing that much money, you're talking about games that realistically should be selling for like $100, $120 right now, based on inflation and things. And we've been lucky to have titles in the $60 and $70 range for as long as we've had. I mean, I remember buying PlayStation games for $50. The fact that I'm only buying games for, even still, like new titles for $40, a max of 70 on most titles, and that's brand new, in off the street type deal. Yeah, I mean, I totally get the position here, that Sony and these other companies are in by doing these remasters, doing these remakes. If you can get, especially a remaster, something that you already kind of have that code for, right, and just touch it up, really enhance it, and then put it back in the market and make some money, I think it offsets the amount of money that they're looking to make off of these other large games that are coming out. And so, in a sense, do I, like seeing Last of Us Part 2 remastered and Last of Us Part 1 remake? Not really, right? But I understand that with those games coming out, it means that other titles that I am interested in may be kept at a lower price because they're making revenue off of these other remasters and remakes. So that's
Mhm.
kind of the position I'm looking at it from, is it does benefit me for these to come out, even if I'm not purchasing it and I'm enjoying it. Indirectly, I am getting some sort of savings, I feel, based on the fact that they don't have to increase their prices because they need to generate more revenue.
Yeah, I don't have a dissenting opinion or anything that's going to make us like argue about this. I think that we like there's just more to say about that for sure. Like I agree with you completely. The like the only time I think that the idea of like remakes or remasters like causing issue is if Naughty Dog themselves had to pause working on their next big game because they themselves had to now spend the time, effort, energy to remaster or remake that. In the case of a lot of these things, like when the assets are essentially like already there, you can give like a handful of artists the ability to kind of like upres, increase textures, find like uncompressed version. Like you can have a small team help facilitate all of that while still maintaining that studio's ability to make their next big thing or whatever it may be. So as long as it's not detracting from like these teams' abilities to like still make their next things or like slow them down in a development standpoint there, like I have no problem with them existing. Like, if you don't want it or you don't need it, you don't have to buy it, but like if this gives a studio or a company the chance to like bring in additional revenue from a game they've already released, or give it a second life, or do something that's going to help them like not have to close their doors like we're seeing with so many headlines already to begin with this day and age, sign me up, just like keep doing it. If it's a low investment but high reward for them, like that's fine. Like, I'll buy the ones I do want or do like or do want to revisit. But um we technically don't even have a world yet where we like can give money to Sony or Nintendo or whoever to just play PS1, PS2, PS3, PS4 games all in one system. Like I want to be able to give them money and do that. Some type of streaming or downloadable access or whatever it may be. Like throw the ISOs up on some virtual store and let me play them on an emulator, and like I will give you money to do that. We can't. So if this is the band-aid until we get to that life, with them just recompiling the code with an in-engine like fidelity update or something like that, like cool. If I want to play it, like I'll buy it that way. Or if there's enough fans out there who want to play it that way, want to buy it that way, that's only going to help us. Like I don't have a conflict with that at all, for sure.
Yeah, or just give us a console that, has backwards compatibility all the way to PlayStation 1. That'd be nice, right?
Yeah. I mean, I
Anyway,
think the big thing too, though, is like the statement though is that single player games have become so expensive to create that selling remasters is necessary. Like that is true. I mean,
yeah,
we talked about earlier when we talked about Blue Stinger, but doing that research on that and everything, Climax was an 18-person team in Osaka, Japan, making Blue Stinger. Now we're talking about Naughty Dog. Like I bet at peak they were probably employing, around 200 employees. It's probably not impossible to think. All the different like artists, designers, engineers, programmers, like staff members to involved with all assets of rendering, engine, pipeline, like everything that was involved in there. Like, so when we were making games that we sold for $50 with an 18-person studio, and then now we're making games that cost $70, a little bit more, but with how many times more amount of people, like those people have to be paid, like they have to earn a living, like they deserve it because they're creating the artwork we're all enjoying and loving. So yeah, like these costs are definitely growing because we're also still living in a cycle where we expect these games every 2 to 3 years. And, instead of letting those 18 people like develop this over a decade to give us this game or however long it would take them to potentially do it, we're wanting it now. We're wanting it as soon as it can be, and we're wanting it like with instant gratification. So we have to have these giant teams do this. And then the minute these games fail or lose wind in their sails, the studios close down and hundreds of people are out of jobs because we're treating them like this weird fodder and everything. So if remakes or remasters are in any way like a band-aid to protect those people, to protect creativity, to keep these groups working together with like the cohesion and everything they have to produce and continue their stories, boom, I'll keep them.
Another point too that I'd want to bring up is I really wish some of these like larger studios put more like indie type titles out, right? Like we have these small indie teams of like less than 10 team members putting out like fantastic titles on PlayStation and Nintendo Switch and such. Why can't a Naughty Dog put out several titles a year with the expertise that they have on their teams? You don't have to over engineer it. We see like pixel based video games, selling like crazy, right? Like they have a ton of marketing that they could put behind them between them and Sony to really get some of these like first party titles out there that isn't going to break the bank in terms of development. Should be a faster turnaround time, you'd think, in development because of all the talent and the size of that company. I would think that would be a good option as well outside. So that way you're getting new content put in the market, which is going to fill the appetite of gamers who are saying, I don't have enough games on my console. But at the same time, making money for that studio, offsetting the larger costs on those big projects. So I think that's another direction it could go. And we don't see them doing that.
Yeah. I mean, because like, I understand when you're on a big AAA budget, like scale and schedule, like your environmental artists are not working on the same amount, it's doing the same amount of work and needed in the same amount of like capacity from day one as they are in like the final day before it goes gold. Like their work is probably done, and then like they're not necessarily in that. Maybe they're working on pre-production for next game, whatever it may be. But like if they if there was this initiative or understanding or ability for like, hey, like if you've done your part and we're not moving on to our next game, or we need you maybe in 6 months once the rest of this content's finished, like, yeah, think about some of those smaller games. Maybe you have like studios within studios or teams within teams. I mean, it reminds me of like you saying that, but Geometry Wars, like a fantastic Xbox Live Arcade game. Love that game to death. It actually was originally Bizarre Creations was the creators of that, the original developers of that, and they were doing like the Project Gotham racing games. Like it was actually a hidden mini game within an old Xbox Project Gotham racing game, and then it like spun out into that, and like so it didn't need the entire Bizarre Creation staff to like make that game, but like staff within the staff was able to kind of do that, create a revenue generator and like do things for them that actually spun out and did something rad. Like I bet they do a lot of like kind of like team building, like, hey, 24-hour like like game idea, like like pitches and like weird things like that internally, or maybe they like do like these little program things. Yeah, what if they just took these like fun concepts and made them into like smaller indie sized releases per se that helped continue to develop skill within your team members, which from a studio and financial standpoint, these folks are staying busy, they're working and they're creating a product for you, and two, they're gaining skill, they're continuing to work, they're not without work and everything, and it helps build them to be better and more talented at what they're doing to begin with and owning their craft. Like yeah, like I mean I think we just have to restructure like how the current game development expectations versus like team expectations are, so that everybody does have this healthy give and take and output.
Yeah, and like we were just talking, Incredible Crisis, right? It's like an hour and a half game. We enjoyed that title, right? Like there was something to love about that game. And it's like a $70 game now, I think, or maybe even higher. For that for a complete in box. But like in today's day and age, could you not create a 1 hour long title that was created over a span of 24 hours, maybe several days from a small team in a team building activity and put it on PlayStation Network and Xbox Live and all these other places for $5,
Hmm.
right? Like rather than just have it sit there, throw it into the market, see what happens. Does it gain traction? Are you able to build off of that and make additional money for the company? Possibly. But worst case scenario, you have your team of developers who created something that's in the market, right? Something to boost morale in a sense as well. Hey,
Yeah.
that's a completed project. My completed project it's live, it's selling, right? However big that team was.
What is that new Xbox Obsidian game? That RPG that's like Elder Scrolls inspired. Avowed? No, no.
Oh yeah, I think I don't know. I haven't played it,
Yeah, I
but
haven't played
I'm
it
thinking
either,
it's
but
about.
it looks cool. It looks rad. I'm not really big in fantasy and all that stuff, like settings per self, myself per se, but I know there have been some mixed reviews on it because it isn't quite like the full scale of like a Skyrim or an Oblivion or something like that, But it is a game in that vein for folks, and it definitely is, good enough to stand on its own as a good entertainment and all that stuff. But like what I worry about is like, as Obsidian, as that team, they put all their eggs in that basket to help make this game, and if it doesn't deliver on the goods because it took them a couple of years to make, if it because it didn't quite hit that, like, oh my gosh, it's 10 out of 10 and it's the next like big thing that everyone has to buy, they shouldn't be like stuck in a position where they're like worried about their doors being shuttered and everything, and you get that when your development cycle is like, hey, we've got 3 or 4 years or longer on this title. Like, this is all we're going to be doing. So if this doesn't turn into something, like, who are we and what are we going to do?
Mhm.
Having a platform like this where, like, yeah, like we're moving on from a different process, we're moving on, like we're shifting gears into this, like, I can splinter off this small team to like help do like a smaller idea, like a fun, you know, digital download only experience, or a fun, like, one-off type of thing, if that's going to help you generate revenue and stay solvent and stay whole and not worry about like everything riding on like the one experience, like, yeah,
Mhm.
let you keep the studio doors open, let you keep things together. And one scary thing about all this too is treating developers like, hey, ramp up this team, 300 people, just push this game out the door, and once we're done we can shut the doors and we don't need them anymore.
Yeah.
Like, having them work together. Like, if you work with a coworker for years, you know what they're good at, you know what they're bad
Mhm.
at. You start to like pick up for their faults, and you start to help them shine with what they do well. And then as a team working together, like, you all can start to build like a shorthand. You all have like an understanding. You can get into like that, like, shifting gears mode, and how you're all participating in this. Like, when you're constantly having to like find, get a resume out, join a new team, start that next big AAA thing, you don't have that same ability and capacity to, like, with your peers, because they're no longer your peers. You're so many new
Yeah.
faces that's going to impact the quality of what that game is. So even if that one game isn't a hit, allow this team a second or a third or a fourth at bat to like build off of like that morale they have together, because you're going to get a better game out of that than you are just pretending to like close that door and then just throw money at a whole bunch of other like folks, expecting them to ramp up with a bunch of strangers who don't know
Mhm.
each other and get anything different from that.
Yeah, and then you don't have to feel like as a company, oh, we have to rush this game out the door, right? Because we're still generating money in other areas that, like you said, are going to keep us solvent and allow us to hone in on our craft and make quality products. So,
Hmm.
yeah, we could go on about this for hours, I'm sure. Uh, there's a lot going on in the industry of layoffs and things like that. It sucks. It's been going on for quite a while, and it's just unfortunate. But, um, dude, I mean, no inflation, deflation this week for us, but definitely appreciate having you on.
Yes,
Talk
it's
video
always
games.
fun to be on.
Yeah.
I'm on your short text if you need me for any reason, short notice, long notice, any big plan, small plan. Shoot me, hit me up. I'm down.
Sounds good, man. Cool. Well, for everybody listening and watching, I've been joined by Darren Hupke of Pixels and Polygons LLC. Uh, so
It's
again,
now an LLC. Yes.
yeah, it's not LLC. This has been episode 332 of the Game Deflators Podcast. My name's John,
I'm
joined by
Darren.
Darren. Yep, you're
Yep.
Darren. Yep, that's how
Sorry.
we end it. It's gonna be funny on
I'm
the
Darren?
audio.
Question mark. Who put a question mark on the teleprompter?
And thanks for listening.